Hello and welcome. In today's video I would like to introduce you to all the new items in the bit shop at Elizabeth and which of them are worth buying in my eyes and which you should rather save your bits for now. Of course you can use your bits to sell the new items for coins in the auction. Because the items are still completely new, many people are willing to pay more coins than the items would be worth if you would exchange the bits for coins. But let's start with the new items. First we have a block zapper for 5000 bits, which is the counterpart to the builder's wand, because with it you can remove multiple blocks of the same kind with one click, and unlike the builder's wand, the blocks don't even have to be on the same level for you to remove them. With the zapper you can remove a maximum of 164 blocks at once, and with the update it was also added that you can undo the last action you did with the builder's wand as well as with the block zapper. But unfortunately you can't really do anything with water despite this feature, because you can't do any action of the zapper if there is no air left at the block. But let's move on to the next item from the bit store, the Rune Sack for 10,000 bits, and in this you can then store a stack of each rune, and each level of the rune in itself it's quite good, because then for example during dungeons or slayer grind the inventory is not quite cluttered with any runes, but in my eyes a stack per rune is quite less, because just from the frequent rune a stack can come together quite fast. Because of the small space and because you can use backpacks for runes, I would say use your bits for something else before you buy the bag, and maybe wait until you can get it cheap when the items are not so popular. The next item is the Autopad Rules pack. If you buy this item and use it, you will unlock a new feature in the pad menu called Autopad, where you can create rules that when something happens in the game you equip a certain pad. Currently you can choose from the following rules. When you log in, when you get XP from a certain skill, for example when you start mining, your silverfish pad is automatically equipped. When you enter a certain island, for example when you go to the Floating Island, you automatically equip the monkey or the ocelot pad. When you are encumbered, when you kill a certain mob, for example when you start grinding Zealots, your enderman pad is automatically equipped. When you collect items in a collection, for example when you start harvesting potatoes, the elephant is automatically equipped. When you select a certain dungeon class, for example when you select mage, the sheep pet will equip automatically. When an event starts, for example the fishing festival, the dolphin is automatically equipped. When you equip a certain wardrobe slot, for example when you catch a Yeti and switch to Magic Find armor in the wardrobe, the Magic Find pet will equip as well. When a boss spawns, that you then for example switch to the cat to have more Magic Find for the boss. When you start a Slayer quest, to then switch for example from the cat back to the wolf. When you click on the experimental table, when you go AFK, for example if you have a lot of melee minions standing around, so the rabbit pet is automatically activated when you are standing AFK on your own island anyways. When you dig out a griffin burrow and if you open a winter gift. Besides this rule you can add an exception to prevent that a certain pet is equipped because of a rule. There are the following exceptions. If you are on a certain island, if you already have equipped a certain pet, if there's a certain event, if you have a Slayer quest active, and the last exception is Thursday. The rules make the life in SkyBlock a lot easier, as the examples I gave above are just some of the possible use for the Autopad rules. Therefore, I would advise everyone who often does something where you have to change to a pet to get the item at least once, and if you don't need the rule anymore, you can rewrite it. And for the people with too much coins or bits, they can buy as much as possible, and at the moment it seems that 14 is the maximum number of rules you can have, and then you can create a rule for every possible situation, so you don't have to reconfigure the Autopad rules later. The next item in the bit shop is the Kismet Feder for 1350 bits. With this you can then reroll a reward chest at the end of the dungeon in the hope of finding better loot in it. With the feather, however, you can really only reroll one of the boxes. This uses up the feather and you can only use one feather per dungeon run to reroll the chest. Especially for people who play a lot of dungeons, this item is very interesting, but for people who just want to make some profit with the new bit store items, this item is probably the best choice, because the demand for it will be very high, and in the long run the demand will still be very high, because the item will be consumed, and compared to God Potion, the feathers will be consumed much faster. The next new item is an enchant for the farming tool, similar to Compact for mining or Expertise for fishing. There's now the enchant Cultivating, with which you get more farming XP and more farming fortune, and the more plants you harvest with it, the higher the bonus of the enchant becomes, whereby you get per level 1% more farming XP and 1 farming fortune more. If you participate in the Jacob events or earn your coins with farming, the enchant is definitely worth it, but also for the people who are not yet so good at farming, I would advise you to make the enchant on your farming tools, because you should have a better chance to reach a higher score at the Jacob event with it. Since you have to put the enchant on each farming tool, I think that just shortly after the update, by selling the enchant in the auction house, you can also make quite a good profit. And as the last new items at Elizabeth, we also have 3 new enrichments that you can put on legendary or mythical talismans. First, we have a sea creature enrichment, which gives 0.3 more sea creature chunks, a ferocity enrichment, which also gives 0.3 ferocity, and an attack speed enrichment, which increases our attack speed by 0.5. Of the 3, I think the sea creature enrichment is the most useful, because it should be much easier to reach 100 sea creature chunks. But the good thing about the enrichment is that you can change them relatively cheap at any time by using the enrichment swapper, which costs just 200 bits. That were all the new items in the bit shop. Feel free to write in the comments which of the items do you like the most, and otherwise I wish you a wonderful day and ciao!